We begin Perka Ba'asr, we begin the 14th and final chapter in the Rambam Hilchos Shechitah, laws of slaughtering, in the Sefer Kedusha, which is the final halacha in the Sefer of Kedusha, which discusses related halacha to the laws of Shechitah, that of Kis Adam, which after the slaughtering, the obligation to cover the blood. As Rambam Halacha qualifies this mitzvah, it says, mitzvah say the pazik mem lechasas dam shchitas, to cover the blood of the slaughtering of specifically chayatar, a wild kosher animal, or oivtar, or of a kosher bird, in contrast to that of a behema, of a regular animal. Shlomo says in the pasuk in Vayikra asher yotzu tzeid, that if someone's going to capture chaya or oif asher ya'achil, a wild animal or a bird that could be eaten, which is that of a kosher animal, b'shavach es damay, and he spills the blood, meaning when you slaughter, b'chitzol ba'afar, and you cover with earth, lefikir, therefore, that it's a positive commandment. Chayv levarach koim shechased, someone has to make the bracha before he covers the blood, which generally we do Oivel Asyasin before we do the mitzvah, make the bracha, which is Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, our God, King of the world, Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvahs, who sanctified us with His commandments, b'tzavanu al Kis Adam, and He commanded us regarding covering of the blood. Now, halacha base says, Ram Kis Adam noyeg, the mitzvah of covering the blood. This applies in contrast to the previous halacha. B'mezuman, meaning of the previous parak, b'mezuman b'she'en mezuman, whether the bird was prepared or not prepared, because Lo Yinam Asher Yotzi doesn't say that he captures it, that he caught it, which would sound like that only if it's not prepared and they just happen to catch this catch. No, El Behavior is just talking about what generally is the practice. You catch a wild animal or bird, contrast to a behemoth, which is domestic. So, but it applies in all situations. And B'neg B'chum, it only applies, however, regarding unconsecrated animals. V'lebim Mekdashim, not by sanctified birds or chayes. And that's being kachim mizbech, being kachim b'degabaz, whether it's those kachim that are sacrificed on the altar, or whether those that are only sanctified for the temple upkeep. Now, if you violate and he slaughtered the chayis or oifis of kachim b'degabayis, which you not slaughter until you redeem them, but ein chayv l'chas dam, again, there's no obligation to cover its blood. Halacha Gimel says, Ram shachat chay ba'oif. Let's say slaughtered a chaya and oif. V'achach ikdishim, and only after that did he sanctify those creatures. Or let's say he sanctified the blood. Chayv l'chas, there would still be an obligation to cover the blood, because here the mitzvah of kisui, which was from the moment that it was slaughtered, came before one sanctified either the blood or the animal, and therefore that obligation still stands, even though it doesn't apply when it was previously already hektish. Halacha Dalet says, Ram Kalayim, regarding a hybrid creature, abam and behema b'chaya, that's a mixed breed from a behema and a chaya, or v'chein barrier, so to a creature, she's svek behema chaya, this creature itself, this species, that known as the kai, which intrinsically in doubt if it's a behema or a chaya. So tzarich lachasis, out of the doubt, or because the mixed breed, one has to cover the blood. But vein mavarach, because of the doubt, it does not make a bracha, as generally the halacha is, that by safek bracha lahakal, but when there's a doubt regarding bracha, we go leniently. Now, if someone slaughters an animal for a sick person on Shabbos, a chaya or oif, which because of a kuch nefesh is allowed to, but chayv l'chas l'achar Shabbos, so there's an obligation to cover the blood, but that doesn't override Shabbos because now the person already got the food that they need to. One covers the blood after Shabbos. And so too, if someone slaughters a creature that's doubt what its status is, behem or chaya or kalayim, or it's a mixed breed, b'yamtiv, which on yamtiv you allowed to slaughter animals, but that's only for echal nefesh. Here, where it's not necessary because you don't know if it's a behema or chaya. If it's chaya, yes, there's a mitzvah. Behema is not a mitzvah. During the weekday, we don't care if you're covering it if it's unnecessary. So then you cover the blood after Yom Tov, not on Yom Tov proper. Halacha says, if someone slaughters many birds and many types of wild animals in one place, so you make one bracha for all of them, but and one act of covering it is sufficient for them all. Halacha says, if blood got mixed with water, so if it has the appearance of blood, so it's not nullified and it has the obligation to cover it. But if it doesn't even have the appearance of blood anymore, then pater, it's already batal and he's exempt from covering it. Let's say in the sort of biyai, let's say it gets mixed with wine, or b'dam behema, or the blood of a behema, which blood of a domestic animal is not obligated. So although it's blood with blood, we still view that other blood as if it were to be water, which is that if it would be possible to see the appearance of the color of blood, if this would be water, that then you would be obligated to cover it. So then you have to cover everything here from this whole mixture. But if not, pater, then he's going to be exempt. Halacha Zayin Ram continues regarding what type of blood does one have to cover. Meaning, as Ram says, kisob in the scala, what happens if he covers it, but it gets uncovered? The wind blows away the dirt that he covered the blood. Well, he doesn't have to cover it another time. He already did his mitzvah of kisadam. Let's say kisasu ruch. Let's say the wind covered it. He was about to do the mitzvah and the whole pile of dirt, whoosh, the wind blew and covered it. So in the chav l'chas doesn't have to cover it; it's already covered. But let's say let's say it's something that got uncovered after the wind already covered it. Well, then Chayav L'chas he has to cover because he never did his mitzvah of Kis Adam, and therefore when now it is able to be done, so now he has to do it. Halacha Chesed Ram Dam Hanitzas, regarding blood that was sprayed from when he was slaughtering with the knife to all the sides, or Vishal Asakan that's on the knife itself. So Imein Sham Dam Elohu. So generally that's nullified. That's not obligated to go ahead and do the mitzvah of Kis Adam. But let's say that's the only blood that there is. There's no other blood to do the Kis Adam with. And you have to cover that blood too. Let's say he slaughters, but the blood get absorbed in the ground. So if it's recognizable, the color of blood there in the ground, you have to cover that because you still see the remnants. From love, if not, then it's like the wind had covered it. As we said, then you can be exempt from covering it because it's already covered. The obligation of covering the blood is only the blood of slaughtering, which that it was slaughtering that made the animal fit to be eaten. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that which you will eat. The blood of that animal is an obligation to cover. So therefore, let's say someone slaughters the animal and finds out that it's a treifa. Or he slaughters unconsecrated animals in the courtyard. Or he slaughters a wild animal or bird that already had its judgment passed, it has to be stoned. Or where someone slaughters and it was nevela, he did a bad shechitah and made a nevela as he was doing it. So all these animals cannot be eaten. So the blood that is from the shechitah is exempt from covering. And so to a deaf, mute, or mentally deranged, or minor slaughter an animal on their own, which is not a valid shechitah, one is exempt from covering the blood of their slaughtering. It has to be that one could eat the meat from this animal that was slaughtered. Now, the Rambam continues regarding what type of materials and the format of covering the blood. As the Rambam says, with what can you cover the blood? So it's besid with lime, with agapsis, with gypsum, with zeveldak, with thin fertilizer, with choldak, and with thin sand. She'in hayitz tzarich l'kashrei, that a potter would not have to crush it because it's so thin. Ubeshchikis avonim mecharasim, and with grinded stones, and with earthenware. Ubenoir shal pishtan, and with small little pieces of shal pishtan daka, of fine flax. Ubenesaris charashim daka, and the thin chips of fine chips from the wood from the wood maker. Levena, meaning from the one who chops who carves out the wood, the carpenter, these small little pieces of wood chips. Levena, and with bricks, becharsis, and with some interpret as burnt mud. Umagufa shekesasha, and with the seal clay of a barrel that was grinded. As Rambam says, kol elim offer him. All these are types of earth. Now, but let's say you just covered over with a vessel, or you covered it over with stones. In the case, that would not be considered as a covering shema because it says "ba'af" is covered with earth. Earth is obviously a different consistency than just a flat cover, which is not going to be valid. Now, look at base. Therefore, one cannot cover it with coarse fertilizer, or with cholgas, or with coarse sand, with kamach, and with flour, with subin and bran, and mursin and fiber, shchikis, klimatakas, and grinded metal vessels. Because these are not types of earth. Because, and even those other types, which are also technically not earth, but since they're so far on the ground, it's like earth. The one exception is grinded gold, where that you could cover the blood with, and they should nikra off because the Torah calls it dust. Shlomo says in the pasuk in Iyov, and the dust of gold he had. And by so this says in the pasuk in Devarim, by the egel hazahav, by the golden calf, they grinded it down until it was thin, like dust, like earth. Which, so we see that the gold dust is therefore going to qualify for mitzvah kis adam. Halachid gimel, machasin, one could cover b'shichur, which that black is v'hupiach hakivshan, that's the soot from the oven, uvekaychel, and with stibium, which is this type of dust that women would put on as makeup around their eyes. Uvenikras psilim, and this the dust that one cleans out from the mills, ube'efer, and with ashes, beinefa eitzim, whether it's ashes from wood, ubeinefa begodim, whether it's ashes from burnt clothing. It's a leifa basash in this, even if it's the ashes of meat that was burnt. Kashari kasa, we have a pasuk in the midbar that says me'afar streifas achatas. It's really ashes, but it's called me'afar with an ayin, from the dust of the burnt chatas by the paraduma. So we find that you see that it's called afar, and also mutal chasa b'afar erenadach. You're allowed to even cover with the dust of the city that was killed out because they did Avodah Zarah, although generally Avodah Zarah is asur lahanas, but now have any pleasure, but mitzvah lav lahanas, and mitzvah is not considered having a pleasure from, and therefore those ashes or the dust is also going to be permitted to be used because mitzvah lav lahanas nenu. Halacha yidal says Ram hashechet tzarich litin afal lamata. The one who's slaughtering has to put first some loose earth on the bottom, but then he slaughters on top of that, and then he covers it with earth because ba'afar is in the earth, so it has to be like inside of it, like beneath and on top of it. But it shouldn't slaughter into a vessel and cover it with earth. And halacha tezvah, but says Rambam, umisha shachat, and whoever did the slaughtering, hu yichasa, so he should do the covering. Shamak says in the pasuk, b'chisahu ba'afar, he should cover it with earth, which before that the pasuk said, b'shafach hazdam, he spills the blood, which whoever did the shechitah, that's spilling the blood, he should cover it with earth. Now, let's say he didn't cover it and someone else saw this, that person has to cover it, because this is a mitzvah on its own. It's not dependent on just the slaughtering as if it's a continuation mitzvah of shechitah. It's on independent mitzvah. It's just whoever did it, he has the obligation, but if he didn't, everyone else has to cover it. Halacha tezayin. And when he covers the blood, he shouldn't cover it with just kicking some dirt with your foot. It'll be other he does it with his hands, or besakon, or with a knife, or with a vessel. And the reason is kaddish le'inig by minig bezan. You shouldn't treat it in a disrespectful and disgraceful way. That is, v'yu mitzvahs bezuislav, that mitzvah should be disgraceful when he just kicks some earth over the blood. And as the Rambam explained, she'ena kavod la'atzman shal mitzvahs, because the dignity that you're doing is not for the essentialness of the actual mitzvah itself, as if there's something over here. Like, what's the big deal? Just dirt and blood. No, elamisha tziva behen baruch hu. It's the one who gave this commandment who is blessed. And he saved us from just groping in the darkness. And he organized for us, he lit for us a lamp to straighten out those things that are crooked. And the light to illuminate for the straight paths. That's what the mitzvah is, and this is God telling us how we can live the most pleasurable life, and therefore it's not appropriate to do it in a disgraceful way when HaKadosh Baruch Hu had told us what to do, and if we do it with our hands. So too says in the pasuk in Tehillim, which Rambam concludes his sefer as he normally does with words of thought and contemplation and in the great levels of Torah and the mitzvahs. Ner l'ragli, a lamp to my feet, are devarecha, are your words, Hashem. V'or l'nesivasi, and it's a light for my path. That is why we have to treat the mitzvahs with respect, even including just covering some blood with some earth. B'rich Rachman Desayin, Hashem is blessed that He assisted us in concluding the Sefer of Kedusha, the book of sanctity.